Uh, and uh, I had my boss at the time, General Andy Bush, um, my boss back stateside from where I deployed from, called me up in Iraq and he gave me the bad news and said, "Hey, I'm going to go be the vice commander at Air Force Materiel Command. Um, I can find you a spot there. We'll get you to 30, no problem." I told him, "Sir, if I'm going to shuffle papers, I'm going to shuffle papers for double pay. Give me my contractor pay and my retirement pay, and
Mhm.
put my papers in."
Okay, welcome to the Refit Podcast. Today's guest is Rob Fabian, Chief Operating Officer at Vaya Space, where he's leading the development of next-generation hybrid rocket engines for both defense and space launch. Rob is a retired Air Force colonel. He's got over 25 years of military space operations, missile systems, including work across ICBM programs, space policy, and national security strategy. Now he's taken that experience into the private sector, scaling a space and defense company from a garage startup into a growing operation, tackling some of the hardest problems in propulsion and launch. So, Rob, that's a real quick introduction for you. We got a lot to cover today. I'm excited about it. But why don't you give me the 60-second version of what you're building at Vaya Space?
Sure. Thanks, Kyle. I really appreciate you having me here on the podcast. It's great to talk to you again. Yeah, I'm really excited about what we're doing here at Via Space. We are building an entirely new form of commercial and defense rocket engine. So hybrid rocket engines have been around for 100 plus years. They've never been used in anything significant because they have a history of poor performance, irregular thrust, inefficient mass to thrust ratios. Just it's a great hobbyist rocket and a teaching tool, but no one's ever tried to bring them out into the world.
Yeah.
Um, we started the company. Actually, the company started before me with an idea on how we can make hybrid rockets work effectively and efficiently. And I actually ran into the folks who started the company before I retired and
Mm,
got involved later. Funny story if we've got time for it on how
absolutely.
that happened. But um, the interesting thing is that the idea we had at the beginning didn't work.
Mm,
As we got through and tested it, it wasn't working. It wasn't getting the results we wanted, but we learned enough from it to figure out a way that did work. And so now
okay.
we're taking that forward. The company was founded to launch satellites, to
Mm,
build rocket launch vehicles that can take commercial payloads into space.
yeah.
And we've been working that issue since about 2017. First focused on the engines, and then moving into building the launch vehicle. Um,
Mm-hmm.
about 3 years ago, we started to see another demand signal out there. And we'd always known there were defense applications. I saw it the moment I first got introduced to the concept on the technology. My mind flipped back to some of my time with the Minuteman ICBM and how nice it would
Yeah.
be to have a rocket engine that didn't blow up if you rolled it in the ditch. Uh, but we deliberately tried not to do that because we didn't want to split our focus. And
Mm-hmm.
then we started seeing the demand out there. First Ukraine, then
Yeah.
Gaza, now Iran. The stockpiles are getting thin, and we need
Mm-hmm.
a faster, more efficient, more capable rocket engine to replace the stockpiles with. So we're moving in that direction, and that was a risk. You take a small company, and we're about 75 people or so right now. So
Mm-hmm.
we're not the 6 people in a garage we started, but we're
Yeah.
still small to carve off a portion of our focus and our time and
Yeah.
move it into defense was a risk we took about 3 years ago, and it seems to be paying off.
Yeah.
But at the
Yeah.
time, that was a deep decision we had to make.
Yeah.
So,
Fascinating, Rob. And we were talking a little bit before this too. And today's the day that the Artemis 2 is getting
mhm,
launched, and just the interest, if I could say that word very lightly, in obviously space vehicles and launch and all of that, and as you talked, the current events that are going on too. So, I'm curious, as you look back on that decision to get into the defense side, like, what are some of the signals? I mean, some of them you mentioned, but what are some of the signals that tells you, okay, hey, this is a space we need to be in, from a business point of view?
Well, the big largest signal that we saw was the expenditure rate that was going on. I mean,
Yeah.
I know firsthand what it takes to build a solid rocket motor, what the plants look like, what the safety requirements are, and what we're currently scaled at the time to
Hmm.
build. And it was not at a replacement rate. It was very clear it was not a replacement rate. And you have to be very careful handling solid rocket motors, and all these missiles are solids.
Yeah.
One of the major primes actually lost a plant last summer.
Mm.
Automated plant, no one was hurt. They're doing all the right safety things, but they're handling bombs when they're building those motors. And
Yeah.
the building, as I understand it, was essentially gone.
Okay.
Um, what we're doing with our hybrids, I can do it in a garage, I can do it in a warehouse. The engines are inert until they're fired.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
uh, we saw we could speed up the production so we could meet that need and help rearm faster. And more we're seeing the demand signals, one, the rate it's being used, and two, the effectiveness that we're seeing out of missiles. The
Hmm.
old view of war of armies moving back and forth in the ground are still there, but
Sure.
more and more it's turning into missiles and drones. We're
Yeah.
not a drone company. We couldn't do anything in that arrangement. But on the missile side, uh,
Hmm.
with our engines, hybrids are throttleable, they're stoppable and restartable in flight. So you get a lot more flexibility on where that missile can go and how you control it, how you penetrate enemy air defenses. You can build them at a faster rate. You can build up capacity to build them at a faster rate. Uh, we saw it as a huge need, and it just kept growing. Ukraine, it was an attractive offer. We went to the Army Futures Command to see if there was interest, and there was.
Hmm.
Uh, Ended up with a challenge actually to prove it.
Yeah.
So we sat down with the vice commander at Army Futures, and I got about halfway through my pitch on hybrids and the benefits to it, and he said, "We understand hybrids in the Army. We've studied hybrids in the Army. No one's ever actually been able to make these work effectively. Prove to
Mm.
me you can do it, and we'll talk." 5 months
Fair
later,
enough.
yep, they gave us the spec for a Hellfire missile. 5 months later, we had a test engine on the stand firing within performance spec for the Hellfire, and then showing that we could throttle it down to 50% thrust and back up, and that we could stop it, let it sit, and then restart it, either a 10-second gap for an in-flight change, or just to show we could. We gave it a 24-hour gap and restarted it. That really got the ball rolling. It got us a cooperative research and development agreement. It got us interest from a couple of the missile primes, and our
Mm.
program grown from
That's fascinating, and I'm just I'm trying to process having a small team and being focused on the development of something so technical and also exceptionally dangerous at times, and we can get into that a little bit, but maybe a bit of a playback here. How did you go from Air Force colonel to running a startup in a
there.
garage?
It's an odd story. But
Yeah,
that's been the story of my career. I've bounced between positions in two different career fields and not necessarily done the standard career path thing.
sure.
Um, Back when I was still active duty, I was the dual hatted as the nuclear integration team lead, so sort of the senior nuke guy on base at Hill Air Force Base at the depot, to
Hmm.
make sure that the depot for Minuteman and the program office and the supply chain folks all got the support they needed to keep the nuclear industry going on the base.
Yeah.
At the same time, I was the deputy director of plans and programs. And
Mm.
under that hat, I had a team of engineers whose job it was to go out and find cool technologies the depot would be interested in. And they came running into my office one afternoon saying, "Colonel Fabian, you got to see this. They got a rocket engine that can't blow up." And my immediate reaction was, "Bull. There's no such
Yeah.
thing."
Exactly.
Uh, and they pulled out slide decks because that's all the company had at that point. It really
Hmm.
wasn't a company; it was a couple of guys with an idea and a registered name, uh, and said, "Here's the background on what they're trying to do."
Hmm.
And I started going through it and said, "That looks like it would work. Can they get those sorts of results from it?" And they were doing some really small subscale testing at Utah State University nearby,
Okay.
and so they invited me up to see it fire. And okay, on the really tiny scale, it worked. I was fascinated. So I gave them some introductions to some people at Headquarters Space Command that I thought would be interested in the technology. And I thought, cool. I just helped national defense. Then I went back to my work.
Sure. Sure.
Um, 2.5, 3 years later, I'm back from Iraq. I'm retiring, and I'm on a flight from Colorado Springs back to Utah. Um, and 2 seats back behind me is one of those guys from this company. So we got to talking, and when they found out I was retiring, they asked me if I'd be on their board of advisors, just to help give them some pointers.
Sure.
So I joined the board of advisors. Within 4 months, I was VP for propulsion, helping build mostly grant applications, but figuring out what we're going to do to test on a larger scale on the engines. That stayed for about 1.5 years, 2 years. Well, I worked full time for BAE Systems as a senior program manager, and my evenings and weekends were tied up in this crazy startup. Until we got enough money to actually get going. And I waved goodbye to BAE and my friends there and moved to Florida to 6 people in a garage.
Wow.
And it's been growth from there.
Yeah, sure has been. And it's been a great story. And as you reflect back on, leadership in the military to now, now you're running that startup in the garage, so to speak. What changed most for you as a leader in that context?
The lack of structure was the biggest change.
Okay.
Because when I came here to Vaya, I mean, it really was 6 people in the garage, most of them recent college graduates. We had a couple of old experienced heads, but no corporate structure, no military structure. Even things as simple as what time do we all show up in the morning? And I've got one guy going, I coach a swim team. I can't get in till 9, and we ended up creating something new with a sort of core hours concept of work your hours around your schedule, but I need you here between this time and this time so we can collaborate.
Okay.
And that's grown. We're at like 75 some odd people, and we're still using that approach, giving people some flexibility that wasn't something we could do necessarily in the military. But the core approach of what I learned in the military is actually applied fairly well. The motto I grew up with was mission first, people always. Take care of the people, and they'll take care of the mission. And to me, that applies directly into the civilian world, especially in a startup where I've got freedom to sort of structure things the way I want them.
Sure. And a team of people that maybe had a level of respect, but also some healthy skepticism, I would imagine, about this colonel coming in and not having any idea what.
Yeah, they were a little nervous because the core team had formed before I got down here. I talked to them on the phone, but I was being remote from Utah, and so they're, what's this colonel going to be like when he gets here?
Right.
I love this team. The initial team all the way up to the folks we've got now. I will stack these guys up in terms of pure creativity and willingness to get the job done with any team I led in the Air Force. Now, discipline, spit and polish, procedures, they're getting there. But that was the biggest change for me, was going to an environment where, I have to explain to people why they don't wear open-toed sandals when they're out on the test stand. And I could see their point, because we didn't have air conditioning in the first days in that garage, and it got really hot.
Right.
So dealing with the civilian, especially the recent grad folks, and building an environment where we have the discipline we need to operate safely, but they're comfortable and they enjoy their work, it was a bit of a challenge. But again, mission first, people always resonated, and that's worked really well for us.
Yeah, and it sounds like along those lines, you had a certain set of principles and certainly some values, and that's I would say the benefit of how we all are taught to our various within our various branches around leadership and people's at the core of it. It's interesting, as you're talking about maybe a little bit of lack of spit and polish. Yeah, that takes me back to my time working and supporting the special operations community,
Mhm.
where that tends to be a little bit of that, right? It's
Yeah,
not quite as uniform and prim and proper and all of that, but highly specialized and exceptionally professional. And when you take a very focused team that has expertise in the area that they have, and assign them a mission with clear boundaries, to your point, and clear expectations. It's
yeah,
maybe it's not called the commander's intent, in business, but we say, hey, we're going to do this in a safe manner. We are going to follow the proper protocols on these things. It's your safety and your life are too important.
yeah.
So
We
so
kind
so
of
you had
built
to, yeah,
so
yeah,
we built that into the culture.
okay,
You bring up safety in particular.
hmm,
Safety has been a key part of our culture from day one, and
sure,
when you build it like that, it becomes self-reinforcing.
hmm, hmm, and the inevitably, as you grow, and every organization, company that goes through growth, goes through this, is you have to now start scaling the team. You got to start scaling into leadership. And you and I had talked previously, about one of the challenges you had, where you had a really good individual contributor that was moved into a leadership position, and through the course of some experiences there, you had to make a tough call. And I'm curious if you could just kind of walk me through that, to the degree that you can.
Mhm.
But that's not an uncommon situation that companies go through.
Sure. Yeah. This was part of our initial growth. We were just starting to get out of the really small hands-on team.
Hmm.
Um, at the time, we had a part-time CEO who
Okay.
had his own consulting company, and he handled investment, and he and I worked vision, but I handled all the day-to-day stuff. So personnel, finances, uh, supplies, and I was the chief engineer essentially,
Okay.
overseeing all the engineer work. And so I hit a wall. I couldn't do it all. And
Hmm.
so we decided the next thing we're going to scale up into is management level on the engineering. I deliberately kept the structure flat. We still have to some extent, not as
Hmm.
flat. And I went out looking for somebody who could be that engineering leader, to take some of the load off me. Which, that wasn't what I wanted to not do. That's the fun part, but I needed to
Yeah.
do the business side. Um, Finding somebody with a decade or more experience in engineering leadership in a 10-person startup, you can't afford them.
Right.
Unless you find somebody who it's a passion project for, you're not going to get them. So the next
Hmm.
thing we went to is, okay, who can we grow into this? Look for somebody who's had some limited leadership experience, has a strong engineering background, and we found a great candidate. And he was and is an outstanding engineer.
Sure.
And so I thought to myself, he's got a taste of leadership. He wants more. I've trained junior officers to be leaders for
Hmm.
decades. I can train him up.
Hmm.
And so we brought him on, actually hired him for the position, and started going that way. Him working the engineering side and me mentoring him on leadership. And I I missed in my interviewing a streak of let's just say certitude,
Okay.
and I missed the point that you can only mentoring only works when both sides work. It's a two-way street. And so
Mm-hmm.
you need the mentor and the mentee to be putting in effort. And over the course of about a year, it became clear that while he was giving me everything I was asking for to my face, he was not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily implementing uh, in day to day. And so we reached a point, and the final point was we'd had some blow up between him and some of the engineers.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, And he came to me for advice. Great. That's exactly what I wanted him to do. We sat down and talked. So, okay, here's how you should handle it. They've got a point. See it from their perspective. You've got a point. They need to see it from your perspective. Here's how you get that and keep everybody moving forward. Um, Whatever you do, do not just go confront them over this right now. Do this approach. And then he left my office saying, "I understand. I'll do that," and went over and immediately confronted them over it.
Hmm.
That's okay. He's not putting in the effort. He's seeing no value in what I'm telling him. So I got a choice. I can leave him there and continue to piss off the engineers who are doing the day-to-day work,
Hmm.
or I can pull the plug and say I made a bad call. And that's what I did. Took a little bit of soul searching because I liked the guy. I still like the guy. I think the
Of
world of him as
course.
a engineer, but he was not the right person for that job.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. As I've talked to execs and founders, going through that a lot of that seems to be, you know, a consistent story, including somebody that had the technical ability or even was a high level producer in their individual role. That shift into leadership as we can appreciate, it's a completely different skill set. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to work on that. And that's a two-way street. You know, when you made that decision, you knew that you could lose some people. Again, this is small. You brought this person in with clear intentionality. A lot of work needed to get done. So there was a trade-off decision you had to make there that included maybe some short-term pain, if you will,
Yes.
and some risk. But you made the call anyway. What's some of that decision calculus as you reflect on it that helped you do that?
Um, you're absolutely right on that. And that was part of the problem is the engineering staff had broken down essentially into two cliques, the ones who were on the in with him and
Mm,
the ones who were on the out with him. And there were talented engineers on both sides. Um, so I had to look at it and go, I may lose, and I did lose a couple of them. Um, but what's good for the company? What's the long term? And if we continue on the long term, we're going to keep pushing people out uh, repeatedly over and over,
mhm,
unless they get on the inside click. Or I
mhm,
can rip the band-aid off, lose a few people, and build um, a more sustainable organization, better leadership that can maintain that. Now, at where we are now with 75 people, I've got multiple folks, still only about one level between me and the working engineers, but I've
mhm,
got leaders in multiple specialties, and they're doing a fantastic job of it. But
mhm,
my selection calculus was different uh,
mhm,
with them.
mhm. Yeah, and I have this conversation with leaders too, around that. I mean, it's everybody. I've not been in a boardroom or a leadership meeting where leaders, you know, deny the importance of culture, but it's not what you say, it's what you do, right? It's the
Right.
actions that you take, the behaviors that you allow and you tolerate, and holding people accountable to that standard, and that signal has to get reinforced by especially those in the leadership ranks. Um, and as you think about that experience, how did it change your evaluation of leaders now, either bringing them into the organization or possibly even promoting them into leadership roles?
Um, we actually changed our entire interview process to
Okay.
add in a whole section on culture fit, not just for leaders, but for the rank and file as well to some extent.
Mm,
And I asked deliberate questions about leadership philosophy and examples of leadership, not just straightforward ones, but things like tell me about the worst and best leaders you ever served under, not who they were, but what made them a good leader or a bad leader for you. And you can watch their brain process go through what they consider to be a good leader. I've had a couple of people that I've interviewed that were really great on paper. And when I asked that question, I went, no way am I bringing them into this
mhm,
team. Uh,
mhm,
what they think is a good leader would rip sections of this team apart.
mhm,
Uh,
mhm. Yeah, 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 and getting into a process where you have uh, defined, whether they're competencies, but again, expectations and defined questions, and making sure that the interviewing team understands who's responsible for what, but also how you're going to assess the candidates, and then the entire decision process. That's another area that, as you get bigger and the volume of candidates coming through, that can be challenging.
Yeah.
But I find in most organizations that end up being really successful, the executive leadership stays close to that as long as they possibly can. Right, every single person you bring into that team, even at the size you guys are at today, has an impact on that culture and performance.
Yeah. No, I interview certainly everybody who comes onto the engineering team.
Hmm.
Most of the people who come into our manufacturing team, um, to a lesser extent, but still am involved in the finance and the HR
Hmm.
selections. About the
Hmm.
only place I've deliberately disengaged at this point, because I think my team has got it, is intern selection.
Yeah,
And that's purely a survival mechanism on my part, because we
sure.
get hundreds of applicants every time we open up an intern semester,
I bet. I bet.
and we
And
don't
you
bring more
talk.
than about five.
Okay, well, that's fantastic, and a good signal that you guys are doing it the right way, and obviously having a talent pipeline, getting ahead of that now is critical. And you talked a little bit about this. You've got about 75-ish, plus or minus, but people, and now you've got also a layer of leaders underneath you. So what's different now that you're now running? It's still flat, but you're now leading through others.
Um, I'm getting less into the technical details
Okay,
than I would like. I still do, but now it's design review presentations to the old man rather than it being in the bullpen in the discussion on, hey, what if we did this? Um, and I have individual, we called them team leads until recent growth, and we're changing title to directors because we think we've grown enough that it's team lead just doesn't cut what they're doing.
sure.
That I know and trust. My team leads are folks who've been with us for at least 2 years on
Okay.
all of them, with the exception of my software lead. We just hired her, but she's starting up a whole new subsection.
Mhm.
So I know them, I trust them, they know me, and they know how I want to run things,
Mhm.
and we're compatible that way.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that's worked out really well. I think almost all, yeah, all but one of those team leads were hired in after my abortive attempt to bring in some management.
Okay. 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 And now looking at a team of people leading teams, if we could
Mhm.
say that,
Yeah,
from your perspective, and this is more of a general question, but what do leaders tend to struggle with as you scale?
letting go. At least that's been my problem.
Mm. Mhm.
Um, you know, I'm a rocket engineer at heart. I want to be down in there working this. I also know, was it Scott Adams said, I fell to the dark side of management long ago.
Yeah.
So I'm not as good an engineer as these guys. I
Sure.
know that, but it doesn't stop me from wanting to be in there and in the discussions and be involved. And one, I can't because I don't have the time. But two, it slows
Mm.
them down because uh, they have to backstep and explain, or they have to schedule it around my schedule. I was at an Army conference all last week. Okay? If I were having to be involved in everything, then what do we do for that week?
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Yeah.
the fun part is what I'm having to let go to some extent, and being more in setting the policies, overseeing the results, making sure that they haven't missed something,
Mhm.
and enforcing policies. We had a safety escape this week. Nothing
Okay.
major. Somebody got a couple of cuts because the procedures weren't followed. And so, okay, I
Mhm.
had to meet with my test director and we talked through what happened, why, what are we doing to stop it, prevent it from happening again. Uh, you know, not to necessarily go punish somebody because
Mhm.
it was a relatively minor event, but it's an escape, and we want to catch that now and make sure
Mhm.
we do it. So my life now is more focused on managing the managers rather than it is on being involved in the engineering.
I love that, and bringing something forward from our shared past lives, right? The after action or the hot wash, as you
Yep.
say, right? Like everything's an opportunity to learn, and obviously there's always a level of accountability, but but never waste an opportunity like that to reinforce and to whatever degree to retrain and accountability doesn't have to be a punishment thing necessarily, but
Yeah.
um,
Find the root
uh,
cause and fix the root cause.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, right. And catch it when it's at that early stage. To your
Right.
point, right. What would you say is like the hardest thing to teach or pass down to that group?
That's a really good question, and it varies with uh, what generation they're coming from. I hate
Okay.
to stereotype by generations,
Hmm.
but the younger engineers coming in straight out of college, it's not a generation thing, it's an experience thing, but teaching them the need for documentation and discipline and tracking, they're seeing it, but it seems to the creative engineer that's busy work. I could be designing the next part, but you're making me fill out all this paperwork to go with it.
Mm-hmm.
Why? And you know, they'll do it because Rob asked them to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then over time, I've seen the light go on with several of them that, oh, if we hadn't had all that, we'd have had a real problem over here. That's why Rob makes me do this. And now, one of the proudest days of my time with the company, it's a small thing, but was watching one of my young engineers, now a team lead, who was the biggest safety violator in the early days. We didn't understand, why do we need to do this? That's stupid. I know how the system works. I'll make sure that doesn't happen.
Sure.
And I had to rein him in hard a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Not just because, well, maybe he is inherently safe. I don't think he is, but maybe he is. But the guy watching him isn't. And so watching
Mm-hmm.
him go and counseling new hires, saying, no, 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 stop that. That's unsafe. You need to do this. The
Mm-hmm.
same thing he was arguing with me about 4 years before, and seeing the culture transmit down,
Yeah.
that focus on safety, that um, elimination of unnecessary risk.
Mm-hmm. That's a great signal, Rob. I talk about that as the locker room and reinforcement, right?
Yes,
From our old days, that's the traditional NCO core, right? The traditional the job
absolutely.
of the NCO is to reinforce the culture, so to speak. But when the team is reinforcing it and they're modeling it, that's how people learn and they absorb. When new people come into the organization and they're seeing somebody take the time to properly set something up, right? Go through the checklist and whatever the process is that you guys use, it's a signal that they're
Yeah.
watching, and obviously we reinforce that and reward that as much as we can. But and you also talked. I'm curious. You touched on something interesting for me.
Mhm.
Earlier you mentioned having core work hours.
Right.
This has been an ad nauseum conversation that I've been having, and there's no one answer around hybrid versus remote versus what they all can work, but you have to be exceptionally intentional. Obviously, with the work
Right.
you guys do, hands-on engineering, there's a team element that you guys have to
Mhm.
capitalize on, and it, yeah, to not overgeneralize by generation, but what I find is to your point, an experience issue is, um, folks that are used to coming in, especially doing highly technical work, they're very comfortable in front of devices, computers, things like
Right.
that. But as far as working through communication issues, and we all
Mhm.
struggle with that.
Yes.
How are you seeing that evolve as as a team, and especially with your leadership group?
Um, Part of that's been part of the culture that we're deliberately creating.
Okay.
So we've got a motto around here that a good idea is a good idea. It doesn't matter where it came from.
Mm.
I've had assembly technicians come up with a solution to an engineering problem we were having in the field. We did a flight test out in Mojave to prove that our engines flew the same way they performed on a test stand, and we couldn't figure out why the throttle valve wouldn't open on the pad when it opened on the test stand on vertical tests every time, until we realized that we're flowing cryogenic oxygen through it. And when we did the testing at our labs, the rocket was fully assembled, but the bay sections were open so that we could get access to things, and so there was room for hot air to come in. When
Mhm.
the flight vehicle was sitting on the pad, everything was buttoned up. That valve was sitting inside a cylinder of metal, keeping all the cold air in as the chill goes out from that liquid oxygen. And we were actually going below the operating temperature of the circuit board that controlled the valve.
Mm.
And so we're sitting out there in the middle of the Mojave in scorching sun trying to figure out, okay, how do we change this? How do we fix this? And the engineers are going, well, we need to redesign this and we need to pull this. We're going to need to get new parts. We're thinking that we're going to have to go all the way back to Florida, redesign and come back out. And one of the technicians goes, I've got hot hands. Can we just stuff these in there? It only has to work for 40 seconds. We did, it did, and we got 9 of 9 test objectives off. While
No
the
kidding.
engineers were all finding a fancy long-term fix, the technician went, here's the practical application, let's do it. And I was proud of that because we created a culture in which people, they felt comfortable
Right.
joining
Yeah.
into an engineering discussion. Hey, I have a potential solution. What about this?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that story, and not excluding that idea because it didn't come from an engineer or what,
Mhm.
however that shows up. That's
But
fantastic.
to go back to your original question, we built a culture that doesn't do remote work unless you
Yeah.
need to be isolated. So
Yeah.
occasionally I have people who need to just do heads down
Mhm.
math crunching. We've built
Mhm.
an open concept floor plan here. It gets a little noisy sometimes. So
Sure.
we're happy to let people go work from home on a case by case when they need it. But
Yeah.
otherwise, we want them here because that cross flow of ideas between functionalities.
Mhm.
What I found is when you're doing that sort of online collaboration, you talk to the people on your team
Yeah.
and you miss the water cooler discussion or hearing the propulsion guys over there loudly arguing a point that they're trying to figure out that you might have an insight to.
Yeah.
And so we've turned down some really good candidates who wanted to work remotely or partially remotely and said, no, we
Yeah.
don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a spontaneous collaboration, creativity that I think it's just so hard to
Absolutely.
replicate. There's certain things you could do in a one-on-one and slightly in a team's environment,
Yeah.
but yeah, you miss the vibe and reading the room and all of
Hmm.
that, and especially for growing a company and reinforcing culture, it's critically important. Um, Maybe shifting gears a little bit, you guys have taken a bit of a different approach to building the company relative to raising capital. You're doing it in stages. You've been kind of proving things along the way, going
Hmm.
all the way back to that conversation with the Army, like, hey, got it, but show us.
Yeah.
Um, Maybe for people listening, operators, investors, and folks that are watching the space, how are you thinking about capital and growth right now? And what are maybe some of the kind of partners you're looking for as you scale?
Sure. We're approaching an inflection point on capital right now.
Okay.
So we've taken what we call an ethical approach to fundraising. So the
Mhm.
traditional venture capital method is you come up with a great idea, you make PowerPoint charts that explain why it's a great idea, you go raise half $1 billion and go see if your idea works.
Mhm.
It's simplifying, but that's it in a nutshell.
Mhm.
We didn't feel comfortable doing that. We were doing something with hybrid rocket engines that they'd never been able to do before. And we weren't sure we could make it do at the start. It was a
Mhm.
concept. We needed to test and prove it. Um, in the early days, I really lived by the Sherlock Holmes quote, I think it was, that exceptional claims require exceptional proof. And
Mm.
we were making an exceptional claim. So what we
Okay.
did was we raised small amounts of money, uh, initially from friends and family,
Mhm.
moving into high net worth individuals and into family offices. And so since 2017, we've raised about $60 million
Okay.
and built the company on that. Uh,
Okay.
we're we've got about another 20 million in the current raise that we're doing right now at the
Mhm.
high net worth individual family office sort of level. And then we're
Okay.
moving into a more traditional investment bank raise,
Okay.
looking to get about 120 million. And that should take us all the way to um, flight on defense motors and the launch of our launch vehicle.
Fantastic. And if somebody's listening, they want to learn more or potentially get involved, what's the best way to connect with you?
Uh, Easiest way is with email. It's real simple to remember. It's rob@vayaspace.com, VAYASPACE.
Okay.
In particular, if you're interested in investing, it's
Hmm.
invest@vayaspace.com.
Okay.
That gets
Gotcha.
me and to our CEO and to our investment lead.
Okay, and I'll be sure to reference that in the show notes. When we think about leadership, like just kind of stepping back with your perspective, obviously fantastic career, and thank you for your service in the U.S. Air Force, into the business environment. What do most people misunderstand about leadership in a high stakes environment like you're in today?
That's a really good question. So I've got a couple of different answers bouncing around in my head on that. I think the biggest thing that people don't understand is the amount of risk that's out there when you're jumping into this. Uh,
Hmm.
Especially in the early days, it really is an all or nothing operation, and it's not just us. I think SpaceX at one point was 36 hours away from not being able to pay payroll.
Yeah.
Uh, we actually had a period in the very early days where we went without payroll because we needed to
Hmm.
buy equipment for tests, and it was done with complete coordination with an agreement with the employees. We were only, I think, about 10 people at that point,
Hmm.
but most of our folks went about 2 months without a paycheck.
Hmm.
Some of us, myself included, went more like 5.
Yeah.
Uh, I made a point that I was the last one to have my paycheck start back up again.
Hmm.
The old leaders eat last very much applies in that. I can't ask anybody to make a sacrifice I'm not willing to make.
Wow.
Um, and everybody got paid back pay. It's all
Hmm.
been and done. But if our tests had not gone well, if things had not gone right, we might have been done at that point.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's those moments in time, and it takes me back to Ben Horowitz's book, "The Hard Thing About Hard Things," and he calls
Mhm.
that section the torture, right? Where
Yes.
you go home at the end of the day, and you may not make payroll, and you're looking at your spouse, partner, family, whatever that is, and trying to kind of hold it all together, and the intensity of that's part of
Yeah.
that entrepreneurial, certainly that journey,
Yeah.
for folks that are used to, being in the paycheck process, and for us, that work for Uncle Sam, getting paid on the 15th, the last day of the month, right?
Yep.
That's a big adjustment,
Yeah.
and
The stress is the other thing that
yeah,
comes with it when you're in a startup,
yeah,
because
yeah.
even in the military, you have a certain amount of subdivision of responsibility. When I was
Hmm.
commanding squadron, I didn't have to worry about uh, pay for my people. I may
Hmm.
have to go engage with the finance squadron commander to say, "Hey, you screwed up Airman so and so's pay,"
Sure,
but I
sure.
didn't have to manage all of that. I didn't
Hmm.
have to manage the supply chain things for it. The supply system was there, and I might have to do intervene in an exception. When you're doing a startup, you're it.
Yeah.
Finance, payroll,
Mhm.
HR, supplies, all of it comes back to you. My
Mhm.
wife gave me and still does give me a hard time that I'm working longer hours now than I did when I was on active duty.
Yeah. 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 And how, if I may ask,
Mhm.
how important has it been for her support, or at least understanding, through this whole
Oh,
process?
absolutely essential.
Yeah.
Absolutely essential. I could not have done this without her support. At one point, my wife, a former captain, signals intelligence officer,
Okay.
uh, went to work at a Subway shop to
Yeah.
help keep money coming in during those 5 months because
Sure.
we needed additional fund income
Mhm.
in the family. She's an accomplished author, comedian, and all these things. She was
Mhm.
making sandwiches for a while because that's what we needed to do.
Sure.
I talked to her before I accepted the job and left BAE because we were pretty comfortable with BAE. I was
Of
doing a
course.
job I knew. I was working for people I knew.
Mhm.
My immediate boss had been my group commander when I was a squadron commander. Our overall boss had been commander of the top hand ICBM test group, so we all knew each
Mhm.
other. Um, and I came to her and I told her, "Hey, this opportunity's up. They've got money. They want me to come down to Florida." And her reaction was, this is your dream job. You need to go do this. And she supported me every step of the way since. I couldn't have
Yeah.
done it without.
I love it. I love it. That gets undercalled a lot of times too. That as I say, business and life, especially, it's a team game.
Absolutely.
uh, and those of us that get crazy enough to go do these things, like you gotta bring that spouse partner along, and she's all in with you, and obviously, that's a big part of it. I'd like to, maybe as we get this closed out too, Rob, I want
Mhm.
to maybe touch on something that I feel like doesn't get talked about enough. So there's a lot of support out there for junior officers enlisted transitioning out of the military, and that's important and as expected, and it should be. But senior leaders, guys that are coming out, certainly at your level, that '06 level,
Yeah.
they often make that transition. It's kind of quietly, and there's some programs out there, but there's just not a lot of guidance. What advice would you give to other senior military officers that are stepping into the private sector for the first time?
Well, the first question you have to ask, and the one I ask myself is, what do you want to do? Where do you want to be?
Hmm.
I'd always envisioned my retirement was I was going to just take a GS job or a
Yeah.
contractor job and continue doing the same work I was doing, probably at a lower level and a lower stress level,
Hmm.
and shuffle papers. And like that was my actual reaction when I was in Iraq. When I decided to retire, I found out I had not made my last chance at a wing command,
Mm.
uh, and um, I had my boss at the time, General Andy Bush, um, my boss back stateside from where I deployed from, called me up in Iraq and he gave me the bad news and said, "Hey, I'm going to go be the vice commander at Air Force Materiel Command. Um, I can find you a spot there. We'll get you to 30, no problem." I told him, "Sir, if I'm going to shuffle papers, I'm going to shuffle papers for double pay. Give me my contractor pay and my retirement pay, and
Hmm.
put my
Hmm.
papers in." Um, Along the way, I got a wild hair on this. I just fell in love with the technology and the concept. Uh, and so I pursued it, probably to the detriment of some other things I could have done
Of course.
in a more traditional path. I wouldn't change it for the world, but
Yeah.
you have to know what you want. That was the
Yeah.
one thing I took out of there's a senior tap that they do, and I would
Hmm.
encourage anybody in the '06 Chief Master Sergeant, Brigadier General level to make the time to go do it. I
Okay.
did the traditional tap, and that was good, but it was really setting you up to work at a lower level. And if that's
Hmm.
what you want to do, that's great. The senior tap was more focused on helping you think through where you want to go and how you get there.
Hmm.
Uh, and so
Hmm.
I would strongly recommend that. Um, the second thing is, you know, use your network. I don't think I got a single job, and I know I didn't get a single job, and I only had two since I retired, that didn't come from people I knew.
Yeah.
Either the people I'd met who formed this company, or my job with BAE, my
Hmm.
former group commander was the one who hired me on. He knew I could do the job. I'd done it for him before.
Hmm. Hmm. It's critically important. And I also, if I might add, and that's just great perspective and a fantastic way to wrap up. I think I usually say two things
Hmm.
that are absolutely in line with what you just said. Number one is, look, give yourself some grace.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to get it right out of the gate too.
True.
So often that first, i.e., whether it's going to be AE or somewhere like that first gig is sometimes that period of time for you to maybe reinforce or double check your
Hmm.
thinking around what I thought I wanted to do versus what the
Yeah.
reality is. So give yourself some grace, and it's okay if you don't get the right answer right out of the gate. And a lot of times, we don't. And I would also add to your point on the network piece, like it's okay to ask for help.
Yeah.
But if you don't do the work and you don't ask people, they're not going to know, and they're not
Hmm.
going to like look. They'll be happy to talk to you, but if you're not specific and look for the advice, and again, get over a bit of that perception of, well, I'm at a point in my career where I should have all this figured out, so I don't want to ask. It's like that's not a good
It's a
way to
whole new
approach it.
it's a whole new world.
Yeah, yeah.
You're absolutely spot on with my job with BAE. I had put in I had at one point I had a tracking spreadsheet. I think I probably put in 40 or 50 job applications, several of which were with BAE, and
Hmm.
gotten nothing coming back. I
Yeah.
reached out to my network, and uh, Lyman Faith, Colonel Faith, fantastic guy. I'd known him since he was a major and I was a captain new to ICB and maintenance. Called me up, said, "Hey, let's have lunch." Well, that lunch turned into my job interview.
There you go. There you go. Well, Rob, it's been an absolute pleasure today to have you on, learning about your background and what you're building at Via Space. It's an exciting time. I think certainly to be in that industry, but more importantly, the work that you all are doing is critical to the mission, and supporting the national security, piece that is a big gap for us right now. We've got a lot of work to do. We got to close some gaps quickly, and the innovation and work that you guys are doing is front and center on it. So congratulations on your continued success. I'm looking forward to keeping track of that, and I would love to have you back on down the road here and check in.
Thank you, Kyle. Yeah, I can't think of, I can't even envision myself doing anything else than what I'm doing here. This is, uh, yeah, this is the best of both worlds for me. I'm getting to do space, which is my passion, and I'm getting to support national defense, which has been my passion and my avocation for coming up on 35, 40 years now. And so, yeah, this has been wonderful. I would be happy to come back on your show again.
Fantastic. I'm going to take you up on that, Rob. Thank you again very much.
Welcome. Thank you.